All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks to those of you who are at home watching us. I hope you got to watch the space launch along with us. That's pretty cool. One of those things you'll remember where you were, right? When you watched it. So nice to be with you guys. All right, we'll call the meeting to order at 6:39. This is a special committee of the whole meeting. The first thing we'll do is a disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Don't think we had any last time, probably none this time. The agenda, so approval of the agenda, there is just one thing on there, the staff report. D1, can I have a motion to approve the agenda? Councillor Ferguson and Councillor Holmes, thank you. All in favor? That carries. And so here we go, staff reports, D1 recommendation report, OPA 28 rural, village and rural vitality. Director Knight, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. The presentation is set up to be in certain sections based on topics. So if you like, I can pause at the end of each section if you like and have questions at that time, if that makes it easier. So I just want to start off by actually saying thank you to everyone who participated in this project. It's been going on for quite some time, and we had a really great response from the community involved in this project through focus groups and through just responding to surveys, as well as just engaging with staff as they attended 16 different community events as part of the project. And thank to staff as well. A lot of the community events attendance was done by other planning staff, not me. So a special thanks to them because it took time out of their, a lot of times in their evenings and weekends to do those community events. So the purpose of Official Plan Amendment 28 was to strengthen and update our official plan policies, reflecting the needs of the municipality and the as well as the 2024 provincial planning statement that was released. The amendment overall introduces new policies, and it also revises many policies for the villages as well as the surrounding rural areas. So there was two main themes: rural villages and rural vitality. And I'll start off with rural vitality. There's a series of updated policies. One of the big shifts for the within the agricultural designation was the introduction or updated policies of on-farm diversified uses. So on-farm diversified uses were something that OMAFRA has really encouraged in the last number of years. The PPS was updated to include more robust policies about on-farm diversified uses. And so staff have reviewed the existing ones, updated them to align with the current policies. Essentially, on-farm diversified uses are really enable farm operators to diversify and supplement their income. It permits a variety of secondary uses to the agricultural property. That's key for the on-farm diversified uses. They do have to remain secondary to the main agricultural use of the property. But you can think of things such as agritourism activities, cideries, on-farm retail and food services. And I did put, we do have battery energy storage systems up on the screen specifically because we know that that was a topic for ourselves in this municipality in the last year or two. The PPS does not give municipalities the option to exclude battery energy storage systems from our on-farm diversified uses, which means we must include them in our official plan policies to allow them. So a lot of these uses will be implemented as part of a future zoning bylaw amendment that we've already started working on, but we'll really be fine-tuning that hopefully towards the end of 2026, which will update the zoning bylaw where a lot of folks will be able to do these on-farm diversified uses as of right, which essentially means they'll be able to do it to do them without having to go through a zoning amendment or anything like that. And we're also going to be preparing some guidelines to help folks, get through that process depending on the scale of their use that they want to introduce on their farm. We've also introduced new policies about additional residential units, specifically for the agricultural and rural designations. Historically, we've always had policies in the official plan about additional residential units, but they were general policies and they were applicable to everywhere in Mississippi Mills. So there was not a split between urban and rural. So we have created new policies specific for the agricultural and rural designations that speak to very specific items that location and servicing, especially in the rural areas. We've also added policies about rural severance policies to include a range of lot sizes from 0.4 hectares to 1 hectare. And those are specifically for new lots in the villages, with the goal of allowing some more flexibility in the villages, development to occur on smaller lots, that might be reflective of the historical lot fabric. And then larger lots if folks are interested in establishing an ARU, for example, within the village. Also, in terms of rural vitality, one element that has come up a number of times is in relation to our environmental impact statement requirements when it relates to any sort of development in the rural area, and that could be in the village or it could be just generally in the rural area. It was a requirement where an EIS would have to be completed if development occurred at all within 120 meters of a significant woodland or provincially significant wetland. Staff have revised that policy to introduce an exemption, which is based on criteria that is actually provided by the ministry, where we can exempt somebody if they can demonstrate that there's a building site that's feasible outside of the 120 meters. So before it was just a blanket 120 meters. If the property is at all within 120 meters, an EIS would be required. So we introduce a little bit of flexibility there. That'll help with development as well as with rural severances, reduce the number of times that we would be requiring an EIS, especially for rural severances. We've also been, that will trickle down into updates for site plan control for development, of course, as well within 120 meters of a watercourse or wetland. We've also added, revised our rural diversified uses. So we do have right now rural industrial and rural commercial policies. We've essentially blended those into one category. There's examples of uses up here on the screen. Again, that policy change will trickle down into the zoning bylaw. Will be certain thresholds where folks will be able to establish a rural diversified use, again, without going through necessarily a planning application, like a zoning bylaw amendment. It will all be scaled in the zoning bylaw. So depending on the scale of the use, it may trigger some sort of planning approval and it may not. So we still have to work at sort of what the most appropriate scale is, where it would trigger some sort of planning approval. We have introduced a completely new section called Special Rural Uses. These specifically are addressing proposals for large-scale or specific uses in the rural areas, such as shooting ranges, outdoor paintball facilities, motocross uses, or other types of racetracks. You think of those uses as being something that requires a large amount of the rural area and often has very specific impacts in terms of neighboring properties in the surrounding area. So those policies have been introduced in order for staff to evaluate these types of uses if they come forward. They all require a site-specific amendment to the official plan in order to establish those uses first. But the official plan provides us with that evaluation tool and the policies if someone were to apply for an official plan amendment to establish one of those uses. We also have eliminated, there was a lot of repetitive policies throughout the rural section when it comes to rural industrial and rural commercial uses. And we have eliminated that repetition and combined a lot of those policies together just to make it a little bit clearer. And then in terms of rural vitality, it's contained in the report, but we are planning on creating a rural CIP And that's to help to support the rural economic development opportunities that we might have with on-farm diversified uses as well as within the village. We know that there's opportunities for provincial level grants right now in order to get some funding for that CIP. And so we're planning on using this official plan amendment as basically the basis for applying for that future CIP. And I think I'll just take a pause, Chair, if there's any questions.
Any questions so far? Deputy Mayor?
Yes, thank you for that little part of that report. I just wanted to comment on the art studios before and after. We have the pumpkin tour, so there's already art studios in their makeup of the rural landscape. How do you define a studio from a place where they make crafts?
Great question, through you, Chair. That's going to be more defined in the zoning bylaw as opposed to in the official plan. The official plan just lays out those permitted uses. We'll be bringing forward a zoning bylaw that will have that more detail in it. I would say anything that exists today as an artist studio or anything like that, it maintains its right to exist. It's not like we're going to go back to the ones that are existing today and reevaluate them or anything like that. The operations that are in place now will continue.
That was my second question. Yeah, I just find it redundant that you put that in a little bit, that's all.
Councillor Holmes? Councillor, yeah.
Thank you. And Melanie, I'm just going back to the email I'd sent you a couple weeks ago and about the outdoor paintball facilities and the motocross and other types of racetracks. And I'd asked a question about how close it should be to other facilities. And you'd suggested that council could direct staff to include, just a minute, I have to read it. It could to include a policy similar to the policy for shooting ranges, which would be what the shooting range says is they shall not be located closer than 2.0 kilometers from an existing residential use settlement area or where there's a lot. This distance shall be measured from the closest lot line. So I think I would like to bring that, forward as a possibility for both it and for the motocross and other types of racetracks.
Chair, staff are quite willing to add that into the official plan amendment. If we take it as staff direction, we can add it into the formal document before it's approved by council.
Okay.
That works. Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yes. Thank you very much, Melanie. That's, as we stated earlier, has been and continues to be a hell of a project. Not only has it taken a lot of time, it's taken a lot of reading with 166 pages. And throughout on your report date, the 23rd of March, or 24th of March, sorry, there were 9 priorities identified. Starting with, as you had up there, on farm diversification, such things as developing larger lots, rural vitality, septic systems, right down to investigating private water service systems, determining appropriateness of changing severance policies. Out of all of those, Melanie, what priority would you put on those priorities? Where would you rate those priorities?
Through you, Chair, I'd say maybe not rate them as priorities, but easy to difficult, or more would take longer term. So there's some pieces that are a lot quicker for staff to to complete. For example, the on-farm diversified use guidelines, the ARU guidelines, we are already in the process of developing those. So those are fairly easy to complete. The work that we're doing or the investigation that we'd like to do, for example, in Pakenham related to servicing, that's something that we've already started in terms of starting to discuss with our hydrogeologist consultant about a potential step one of a project where they would review any sort of historical well records and things like that to give us an idea of sort of the current state of Pakenham as we could for water servicing and for septic capabilities. I foresee that the results of that study would produce recommendations that likely council would see in the 2027 budget in terms of the next step of what that study would look like.
Do I have another? And all of this will be contained in the 5-year review, is that correct?
Yes, there's some other pieces in the project that, in the report, it touches on a few issues that had been raised. Growth in villages, as well as lot creation in the rural areas. Those will be something that we are going to continue to address in the 5-year review, looking at where's the rural growth and having a little bit more of a more fine-tuned population projection study that would inform us more in terms of the rural growth opportunities and constraints.
Okay, thank you. I was going to propose motions for each of these 9 priorities, but sober second thoughts and in discussion with staff, I guess it should follow staff direction as opposed to specific motions. And if we agree with that, that's the way I would like to see it proceed, if that's reasonable.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one note, and I should have made it with the first staff direction, and for anybody listening at home, a staff direction is to include it in the report, but it still comes back to council to consider. So I don't want anyone to think that we just decided to, limit 2 kilometers away from, just like that. So directing staff to put it in the report means that we can then consider if that's what you want to continue doing.
Yes, I appreciate that. Yep, thank you.
And then if there are any strong objections, you guys can raise your hands and we'll have a talk about it.
Okay, that's my questions for now. I will have a few more. Thank you.
I will say, Chair, too, if I can just provide committee a bit more information too in terms of the 5-year review. We, of course, will be coming forward with a project overview about the 5-year review and what those topics will be covering. So for council's consideration, so it's not something that, that you're not going to hear back from us before we really start that project. We'll be coming forward with a fulsome report and an overview of that project.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Lowry and then Councillor Suter.
I don't want to railroad us from what we're talking about right now. Can you just repeat what that would look like when you imagine it will come forward and what your timeline is on the review, the 5-year?
Through you, Chair, we've sort of done an internal soft launch already of the 5-year review. We've been doing some of these studies and have some of the works in place. We'll be coming forward, I would imagine, probably in early 2027 with an actual overview of what the 5-year review project will be looking for. It doesn't, when we say 5-year review, we're doing a review of the official plan where it doesn't take us 5 years to do the review. Well, hopefully it doesn't, but it would come forward in early 2027 with, like I said, with a project outline, the topics that it would be covering, as well as a timeline in terms of completion.
Thank you.
Councillor Suter.
I have one question that's connected to the point about significant woodlands. And the question is not in terms of the 120 meters. It's how do you define a significant woodland as opposed to a bush lot? Like, obviously, I have read the definition in the ministry guidelines, and that's environmental and economic benefit. Well, that's it sounds good, but it's pretty vague. And once you get beyond the obvious, things like sugar bushes, et cetera, they're very obvious. But where is it? Is it defined by size or use or?
Through you, Chair, it's actually defined by the ministry, and we do actually have mapping. So it's actually defined, it's actually identified on a map. So on our mapping program, it identifies the areas that are woodlots that are considered significant by the ministry's evaluation and definition. So that's how we do it. We don't independently, staff don't independently evaluate woodlots to determine whether or not they're significant. The province already has that information, and we've included it in our official plan.
All right. Does that mean that the province on a regular basis looks at woodlands and would update information?
Through you, Chair, I would say I don't know what the schedule is of how often the province would look at that and evaluate it and update their mapping, but I say that's definitely as part of the 5-year review. We'll be looking at all of the provincial mapping updates that have occurred in order to make sure that our mapping is up to date. A good example of that is the county is going through the process right now to update their aggregate mapping. That's something that will be part of the 5-year review, because the aggregate mapping updates are a lot different than the aggregate mapping that the municipality currently has in their official plan. So all of that will be reviewed as part of our 5-year review. We'll be updating that mapping.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, or can we move on? Councillor Ferguson?
Thank you. ARUs in villages, a minimum of 0.4 of a hectare. Do you see a problem with that? And I'm assuming that that would automatically call up a hydro G. Is that correct? For that smaller lot?
Through you, Chair, yes, that's correct. So generally speaking, we would, if a property is 1 hectare, then hydro G would not be required. But if it's less than that, it would be.
Would be required.
Mhm.
Okay, which adds a considerable cost.
Yes, it can.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, I think you can move on.
Okay, so the next main topic of the amendment is rural villages. So we've introduced new policies relating to each of the individual villages. Previously, the official plan had specific policies about Almont and Pakenham, and then referred to Appleton, Blakeney, and Clayton as a settlement area similar to some of the historical rural subdivisions that we have. So the official plan didn't recognize Appleton, Blakeney, and Clayton as their own village, as their own place. So as part of the consultation, we consulted with many folks who live in each of these villages, and we came up with individual character statements and policies for them. There's not a lot of policies for each of these villages, but it does provide that framework where, as we move forward with updates to the official plan and different developments happen over time, we can build upon those policies. So they include policies related to all the different types of uses that we see in the villages. In addition to that, similar to the policies that we have for Almont, there's a shift in the policy purpose that basically recognizes the villages as being one of the main growth areas for the rural area overall. That is consistent with our PPS that says that the main growth areas should be settlement areas such as villages. So we have seen over time that the village growth has been quite stagnant in terms of looking at our historical growth patterns in the villages. I'd say that the original policies in the official plan did not support a lot of village growth, and certainly didn't contemplate that the villages would grow and evolve over time. The policies were almost written as if the villages were a snapshot in time and they would remain that way. So we haven't, like I said, introduced new policies that talk about the villages as being those places that are important to Mississippi Mills and important to communities, and ones that should be able to thrive and evolve over time, while still maintaining that village character. So I'll stop there. If there's any questions about that?
Counselor Suter.
Yes, in connection with that, we do have quite a lot of wording about recognizing individual character and the evolution of villages, et cetera. We also have this minimum limit of 0.4 hectare up to 1 hectare as a lot size. Do the villages as they exist now have the space to introduce new growth within their existing boundaries of any significance? Because each new lot would be a minimum of 0.4, which I suspect is very close to an acre, right?
Through you, Chair, yes, that's 1 acre exactly, yes. Is 0.4 of a hectare, yes. So part of the recommendation in front of committee tonight is that the second part of the recommendation is that you direct staff to actually include what we call a comprehensive review of the village boundaries as part of our 5-year review. And that's essentially a review of exactly the question that you've asked, is to do a review and answer that question. So to do a review to find out how much vacant land is there in the villages, how much of it can be developed based on the lot size range that we have. And then, as I mentioned, we'll be looking at hiring the consultant to provide us with detailed population projections for the rural area and be able to tell us, depending on how we want to focus growth, do the villages have enough land within their existing boundaries to accommodate that rural growth, or would it require a change to those village boundaries? And so that's part of what the 5-year review would do, is we would also be doing what they call a comprehensive review for the villages. So I don't have an answer to that question tonight.
I have a subsequent question. In terms of the village growth and the boundaries, you've mentioned your 5-year review is really seriously going to look at that. Would the lands that could be taken in to expand the size of villages be prime agricultural land?
Through you, Chair, I don't have that answer tonight either. I would say maybe. The PPS does allow municipalities to contemplate in taking land out of the prime ag designation and including it in settlement areas. So the PPS does allow municipalities to contemplate that. There's a series of criteria in the PPS that need to be addressed and to be satisfied in order to take that agricultural land out of production and add it into a village. So that's something that we will be looking at as part of that 5-year review and that comprehensive review of the villages. There's a lot of factors that go into, it's not just, it is prime ag. That's obviously one of the factors that we consider, but also all of the villages that we have are based around water. So we have floodplains, we have environmentally sensitive areas that we need to consider. We also have topography. A lot of them have, lots of slopes and rises and valleys. So all of those things will be taken into consideration when we look at that.
Just one comment. Yes, I understand that. And when you think about those villages, every one of them has a lot of challenges within the existing boundaries. The paradox is, it sort of lies in the fact that outside of a potential boundary increase, there are very, very, very strict rules about severances, and they're there to protect prime agricultural land. And yet, at the provincial level, if it suits the provincial government to include energy sources, suddenly it's going to be allowed. And I honestly can't see how we could really expand the boundaries of the villages very much without interfering with agricultural land. Okay.
Okay, I think we'll move. You had a question? I'll just, before that, I'll just say now it makes sense to me, Melanie, why when we were talking about villages and you said there's room and I was like, where? Farmland. Yeah, okay.
Just
Big
Just an
consideration.
extension of Councillor Suter's question. I had the same one, obviously. But it flies right in the face of Lear that Councillor Holmes and I spent, what, 2 years trying to develop and have fought it ever since. So now we're, the government in their wisdom have said now you can develop on prime agricultural land. So what was the point? Exactly. And we're one of the few that have a Lear. So it makes you kind of spin your head a little bit and really think how serious it was, because that's exactly what it is, going on prime agricultural land with its own, as you said, unique features that it does have, but there's lots of good prime land there that could be developed. Unfortunately, it's one of those situations. So that's my comment on that.
Okay, moving on.
Okay, and then the next topic is rural and village growth. So we've covered some of this already, but just to take a step back, what we have on the screen here is information about our 5-year average of what's happening in the rural area. So again, this is only a 5-year average, but it is based on a lot of the tracking that we've been doing. So we are producing about 19 units per year in the rural area. You can see 10 of those are by the creation of newly severed lots. Hardly anything's happening in the villages. And then the existing rural lots are properties that are existing in the rural area but are currently vacant. So that's the other piece of where we're seeing some growth happening. In terms of the Lanark County Growth Management Study that I referred to, it estimates that Mississippi Mills as a whole will add 154 units annually. And then our official plan says that 70% of that growth should be directed to Almonte and 30% to the rural areas. 30% of that on a yearly basis is 46 units per year. So the previous slide said we're about 19 units per year, and based on the growth management study and the population projections, we should be around 46. So the big question is where those numbers should be. And this is the piece of, again, I keep talking about this 5-year review, but this is one of the bigger questions that we're going to be looking at trying to answer as part of that 5-year review, and where are those levers for growth. So we do know where we are with severed lots. We'll get into a little bit of the severance review that we did as part of this project, as well as the consultant reports. But what we don't have a good lever on, or a good idea on what lever to pull in terms of a village growth, is where we would be at, if we were to look at the villages a little bit more detailed, and then potentially, if it was warranted, perhaps change the village boundaries. But these are all the questions that we're planning on looking at and trying to answer as part of that 5-year review. I might just segue right into the severance policy analysis that we undertook. So as part of this project, we did hire a consultant to do essentially a policy comparison exercise of our rural severance policies in comparison to other rural municipalities that were similar makeup. There's sort of two major recommendations that were looked at. One was to increase the number of severances from what we call an original township lot. So that's the original 100 acres that was subdivided many decades, hundreds of years ago. And right now, our policies permit 2 non-farm rural residential lots to be created from those original township lots. One of the recommendations from the consultant was to increase that to 3. The other one was what we call a land holding test. So we also have a land holding test in the official plan that has a date of July 1st, 1973. And essentially what the land holding test does is provides us with an evaluation for lot creation. So if the lot was created before July 1st, 1973, it could potentially be eligible to create 2 severances from that original, what we call 1973 lot. And so one of the recommendations was to increase that from 2 to 3, as well as change that date from December 1st, from the July 1st, 1973 date to the December 1st, 2005 date. Now, I will say that the original township lot policy, essentially, when the 2005 official plan was created, the original township lot policy was something that was a policy from Pakenham, and the July 1st, 1973 policy was a policy that was from Ramsey. And they were basically, both of those policies were brought into the official plan and then essentially made equal. So they would apply, those policies now apply to all of Mississippi Mills in the rural area. But that's where they came from. I know that question has been asked of us many times. I can tell you that July 1st, 1973, there is no magic date to that day. Typically, I would say that in official plan policies, anything that refers to a date such as July 1st, 1973, typically is something about when there's a policy enacted. So it's very common to see dates that sort of maybe not make a lot of sense, but if you backtrack, you can find at some point there was something happened July 1st, 1973, where Ramsey Township picked that date to be the date of where they wanted to have that policy for lot creation. So we did attach a number of scenarios to the report about what would happen if you simply just change the number of severances permitted and the date changes. So that was the one thing that the consultant reports did not do. They were just doing a policy comparison exercise. They were not taking it the step further and doing the analysis. Staff have done that analysis based on changing the date, along with the number of severances permitted. We haven't gotten to doing analysis of whether or not you just increased the number of severances permitted from 2 to 3 on its own. That's something that we have not done. But the scenarios in attachment D, I think, really do demonstrate that if you were to do a cumulative change or a combined change of a date change and a number change, it really can really impact the potential of rural severance growth. And that is a concern for us in some ways because of the demands that puts on the municipality in terms of our infrastructure and expectations of residents, as well as minimum distance separation, which is the calculation that's required anytime a farmer wants to expand or build a new livestock facility. So what we're saying is again, that no changes happen as part of this amendment, and that rather we look at this a little bit in more comprehensively as part of the overall rural growth as part of the 5-year review, combining that rural severance analysis with the analysis of the village growth potential, and then making sure that we have both of those together and understanding how those policies could be changed to achieve that 30% growth target. Again, we did go through a review of OPA 22 was a official plan amendment that looked at the growth for Almont and expanded Almont's boundaries. In looking back at those documents, you can tell that the vacant land analysis for the villages was just a desktop exercise, which means a desktop mapping exercise. It was not something that was very, I would say wasn't very comprehensive. And so there was over and underestimating in the villages in terms of how much lands in the village, how much could accommodate growth. Again, that's why we want to take a really detailed look at that as part of our 5-year review. We also have looked at sort of the lot creation policies in the villages. We know with Pakenham, for example, we have some water quality constraints, so we'll be looking at that. We'll also be exploring Blakeney because we do actually have an official plan policy for the village of Blakeney that requires a hydrological study at any time that there's a lot creation in Blakeney. And so we want to review that and find out where that policy came from and if it should be carried forward and if that's a barrier to growth for Blakeney specifically. And again, that 70-30 split, that's something that's come up in terms of, you know, is that an appropriate split? We're clearly not meeting that in the rural area now. So we will be doing a closer analysis of that as part of our 5-year review process. We also would like to look at that 30% growth target in a more nuanced way, where we can look at, see if there's a further split that would be appropriate to target the rural areas and the villages, so that we can try and focus our growth a little bit more nuanced than what is currently happening. And that is the end of my presentation, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Suter.
Yes, I did hear you say that you haven't been able to now to do a lot of analysis of potential. But do you have any data as to how many developable lots exist now, where there are the situations under the OTL or the landholding test that X number of severances were allowed, but they have not been exercised, so the potential is there for growth?
Through Chair, we have completed one of those 2 exercises, which is we do know that there's approximately 100 original township lots still remaining in the municipality and with frontage on an actual public road. So that doesn't include the 100 acres that someone might have that doesn't have road access. So we have approximately 100 of those still maintaining the 100 acres and on a municipally owned road. We do not have the answer to the other one because it is actually, we do have an idea of how many lots, for example, are over 2 hectares. So feasibly could be separated again to have 2 1-hectare lots. But we don't have, what we have to do is look at those lots and do an analysis of whether or not they could be separate again. And that's what we don't have.
Councillor Ferguson.
You? I have 3 questions. Retiring farmer severance. Now, this isn't personal because I already have mine. But is that a consideration as well? That was there in one time?
Through you, Chair, it was in place at one time through OMAFRA. That was when the province controlled the severances overall. We do not have that in our policies now. I'm not sure how OMAFRA controlled that or didn't control that. My caution is that if you label it a retirement lot, there's an expectation that a retired farmer would use it, but the municipality has no control over that. So once the lot is created, it's created. We don't get involved with who the lot is sold to or how long somebody lives on it. So I'd say the intent of the retirement lot made sense, 20 plus years ago when it was in place, but I'm not sure if it really makes sense in this context.
And the farm worker severance, I was reading that in the report as well. Is that a separate one as well? Is that in addition to all the severance that are allowed?
Through you, Chair, no. The farm worker, there's farm worker housing that can be built on a prime ag lot in addition to the ARUs, but there's no actual farm worker severance that's permitted.
And then MDS, which I'm very familiar with. Is there any follow-up of MDS or is it complaint driven after the fact?
Through you, Chair, that's a very good question. I would say MDS is developed by OMAFRA, and they have very specific calculations that they've created. And I am not a technical expert in terms of, especially in terms of odor. So I don't know how that is created, but it is a very specific program. If you were to work through it, it separates each type of livestock type, also then sub-separated into sizes and different types. So it is very specific, but I don't have the technical ability to tell you where it's come from. I would say that I'm not aware of having a lot of bylaw complaints in terms of livestock smell. But I'm also not in the bylaw department, so.
Okay. In all the list of everything on page 2 of the report, number 11, it says, require growth and development to pay its fair share of growth-related costs. Do you ever see that happening? Like, what percentage would that have to be? I don't think we could ever afford that, could we? In rural?
I don't know, I'm sorry, having a hard time finding the
I know, I
page.
did too. Let's see, it's on the, well, not on your report, but it's on the report dated November the 18th. And it's down in the small pages. Reference number, let's see. Reference is number 11 on page 2. Page 1 is the introduction. Oh, sorry. Sorry about that.
Oh. Yes, apologies. Yes, here it is. So that is that's actually an existing policy that we had in the official plan. We actually haven't introduced that, even though it is highlighted. It was just renumbered. So that was actually something that has been there since I would assume since 2005. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Holmes.
Thank you. Melanie, it seems that in a lot of in a number anyway, of the responses we got, people are asking about rural subdivisions. And right now, we don't allow them, so could we just review why we don't? And also, the other thing that seems to be asked for is that third severance. And I just think that's something that deserves a discussion. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, I'd say definitely the third severance is something that we would be happy to look at as part of the 5-year review, like consider that and what the impact would be. Like I said, we've already started kind of doing that analysis, knowing that we have about 100 original township lots. In terms of the rural subdivisions, from what I understand, let's call it a prohibition, was introduced in the 2005 official plan, like when they wrote the new official plan. That hasn't changed from the entire time I think the entire time that's been in place. Like that policy has remained. It's something if committee and council wants to direct us to look at that as part of the 5-year review, we could. My only caution is I would say that considering rural subdivisions outside of villages, right, outside of our settlement areas, we would have very little tools to regulate that. So if you had a policy, for example, that said you could have a rural subdivision, we don't have a lot of policies that would be able to limit the development in some way. So for example, like you really can't write a policy that says we'll only accept, you know, two subdivision applications a year or something like that, right? So once rural subdivisions, if they were put in place, the policies in place, it would be completely developer driven.
So are you saying we don't have the ability to develop some policies to offer some guidance?
Through Chair, no, we do have the ability to develop policies. It's just that we will be limited in how those policies are written and what we could possibly do. So, for example, you couldn't say you can only have 2 rural subdivision applications a year. That's something you can't. That would go against the Planning Act legislation. So we couldn't say that. You could have criteria, that of subdivisions. You could talk about the number of lots. You could talk about the density of them. But in terms of like really trying to limit them or control them, that would be the difficult part.
Do you see that there would be a need to control them?
Through Chair, I think it would be really difficult for anyone to predict. I think there's some property owners who are very willing and want to develop rural subdivisions. And I think there's other property owners, just like the 100 property owners who have an original township lot who have an opportunity to sever and they've never done it. So I think it would be impossible to predict.
Yeah. So is that something we could consider then in our 5-year review, just because it's people ask about it and I'm always interested in giving good explanations why we wouldn't allow it.
Through Chair, yeah, I do think certainly if that's the desire of council to explore that, we could do that in the 5-year review. I would say that, our PPS, the provincial planning statement, does direct growth in the rural areas to the settlement areas and actually favors creating new settlements. So like creating a new village over allowing growth just in the general rural area. So the PPS does talk about concentrating it in those settlement areas. Not saying that we wouldn't be allowed to do it or we couldn't consider it. We certainly could consider it in the 5-year review if that's council's desire.
I think what we'll do, sorry.
Sorry.
I think what we'll do, if it's okay with you, Councillor Holmes, is start a list of the direction we might like to give staff and then discuss it at the end. Is that okay? Kind of like what Councillor Ferguson was talking about. So just because I'm going to write it down, the first direction was about the third severance. Okay. And the second one was to review the
The possibility of rural subdivision.
rural subdivision.
I just feel with with the whole business now of communal septic systems and maybe even communal wells, I think it's worth exploring. I'm not saying that it's not maybe something council would decide not to, but if we don't explore it, we'll never know. Thank you.
Councillor Suter and then Councillor Torrance and then Mayor, and then Deputy Mayor and then Mayor Lowry.
Oh, okay. I have 2 questions. And I'll try to hold on to both of them. First of all, I, for quite a while, wondered why suddenly this prohibition on rural subdivisions came in 2005 or something. I guess it came in with the first official plan. And the only one who has come close to answering it is sitting next to me and said that the thrust for it came from the Ontario Farmers Association and from landowners associations. But a lot's happened in 21 years, and a lot more in terms of growth is supposed to happen. So I also have noticed that many of these subdivisions, such as Greystones and the golf course ones, were built on land that really wasn't good farmlands in the first place, while others, I'm not sure whether Monroe Meadows or Ramsey Meadows were built on what had been Class 1 farmland. But I would support asking the direction to really look into the possibility of going forward with policies for subdivisions. And see, I've lost the second one. So you're saved for now.
Okay, so Councillor Torrance?
Thank you. A lot has happened since the community official plan in 2005, but I wanted to know where we sat, Melanie, with cluster lot developments, and the report is silent. There's no update suggested to the COP. No, I mean in 2005, it was considered an alternative, really, to the development of estate lot subdivisions, to be able to think about cluster lot development, communal services on a smaller scale. And it was the number of lots that were allowed were smaller. You and I have had a discussion over whether or not it could be grown. Would that be a way to have rural development on not prime agricultural land that allowed for good use of a parcel, and like a 10-acre parcel type of thing, that you could have 10 houses, on communal services. So it's a little bit of a halfway in between. So can you talk to me about that, where that might be sitting?
Sure, through you, Chair. A few years ago, we did a private road study that included a review of the cluster lot policies. So those were updated. I can't remember. It feels like it was a long time ago, but it had to have been in the last 5 years. So those policies were updated. I would say there was a policy in the official plan that the cluster lots were supposed to be sort of reviewed every 5 years, and if there wasn't any sort of uptake, that maybe they would be eliminated. We decided to keep them in the OP at that time. And so that's why we did not update them as part of OPA 28, because we had already taken a look at them and reviewed them.
So just as a follow-up to that, then, if I may, Madam Chair, is that if we're in the 5-year update or review, if we were to look at if the private road is the barrier, then could we look at the private road? Maybe that would be the solution, like if we have identified the barrier, if we remove that, could we have a different way to develop?
Did you want to respond, or?
Maybe just include that as staff direction.
Okay, so I've
Include
got
cluster
that. I've
lots.
added that
Yeah.
to our list. Thank you. Okay, so over to Deputy Mayor Manili.
Thank you, Chair. The original 100-acre lots from, what do you call them, township lots, or have you ever considered ones that back on 2 roads, given an extra 2 severance too, instead of changing all the policies?
Through Chair, that's it's an interesting question. Yes, I mean,
Could you include that in the 5-year study?
maybe add that to the list. Yeah, sure. Yes, I mean, there are circumstances, maybe, all kidding aside, there are circumstances where 2 original township lots, 100 acres each, were actually rearranged to be sort of long and have frontage on 2 roads and still remain as the 100 acres. And those are challenging to deal with our existing policies, because our existing policies don't contemplate the 100 acres being any other shape other than the square original township lot.
So you can't consider it then? Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. It's just that every municipality has different ideas about severances, right? So it's just something that came up with when I was talking to somebody else. So thank you.
It is, I've got 100-acre original lots that back onto concessions. Can they have severances on both concessions?
Both roads.
Roads, not concessions, yeah. So we're on to Mayor Lowry, and then we're going back to Councillor Holmes and councillors.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm really very pleased that we've got a fulsome list here that's going to be in the 5-year review. I think the planning landscape has changed so much. Even in the last 10 days, it has changed so much. So something that will be important for me that be considered here is that latest information that we have about communal servicing. There's been a lot of commitments from the province where there were a lot of concerns before about ownership and how things get backstopped and all of that. None of it is defined at this point, but there's really a clear movement on the part of the province to see that as a solution. And I think what I'm seeing is that it's very consistent with core land use policy of not favoring rural lot creation, but favoring more efficient development patterns, which I think Mississippi Mills has followed. I mean, we're in a unique position where we have settlement areas, not just Almont, we have settlement areas, whereas places who also have rural areas don't necessarily have that. So, and I don't say this is a criticism of anyone who's a rural community, but it makes it a lot more challenging for them to act in that best practice of land use. So I think it's going to be really key for us to understand what that communal servicing piece could mean for us. I mean, it's obviously way too early to know at this stage, and there's pilots that are happening and whatnot, but I think that's going to be really important to take a look at. The other thing that I think is going to be really important is the ARUs. That could be quite a game changer in the rural areas. And I think I've been really very consistent about my want of making sure we're not sprawling. One of the challenges in our community is that it's a mix of rural and ag. So when you have rural and ag kind of intertwined, I mean, that's why Lear was so darn challenging too, right? When you have that mix and it can invite non-compatible uses, that's conflict. And we're in an area where we're going to have and have had significant growth. We're going to continue to have significant growth. So I think monitoring and understanding the level of ARUs that could happen as of right with existing properties is going to be really, really important. I think it's important that we're going to have a conversation too, or whoever is around this table is going to have a conversation too, about cluster lots, about estate lot subdivisions and whatnot. I think it's really important that we understand what's the best use, what's the most protected use for the farmland that is intertwined with all of these other non-compatible uses. I'm going to be very consistent on that in any of the conversations we have. That's certainly my first priority, is that we're not impacting agricultural operations. And the last thing I want to say is I don't know if there's a place for this in the 5-year review as well, but I'm very mindful, because of the agricultural and rural mix of the landscape, that what is farmed isn't necessarily prime. And I don't know, to Councillor Suter, your question about Ramsey Meadows and Monroe Meadows, I don't know what the land designation was, if it was prime or not. I can certainly tell you that it was farmed, though. Absolutely was farmed. Emmerich Torek was Holstein. Yeah. farmer for sure, so that was well known to us as dairy farmers. Put my farm kid hat on there, but I think that's something for us to be mindful of. And I don't know if there's a way to capture any of that in this review in terms of the consideration of, I mean, there's MDS for us to consider. There's the LEAR for us to consider. So I guess I'm looking to staff for whether there is another piece there. I'm looking for communal servicing ARUs, and then maybe there's something around this impact to agriculture that I'm really concerned by.
Through Chair to the Mayor, one piece that we didn't highlight, it's actually in the amendment, but we didn't highlight in the presentation, was the introduction of agricultural impact assessments through the PPS. So that is something that is it's a big shift. It's a brand new policy in the PPS that is something that needs to be, that assessment needs to be completed depending on certain, whatever is being proposed in sort of the development. And it's on the developer of whatever that use is to do that assessment and ensure that the impacts to agricultural, surrounding agricultural uses are either addressed or somehow mitigated. And so I think that's our tool to make sure that that's addressed. I'd also say that I would absolutely completely agree with you. I've worked in a municipality where it's almost all prime ag, and that is a lot easier
different
municipality to
history.
work in terms of land uses and things like that. So the split is definitely challenging. And so I would agree with you on that one. And I think the AIA is the tool to make sure that, if we do contemplate the development in the rural area, how that is addressed. The PPS still does preserve and prioritizes prime ag lands. It's not just because I mentioned that it does consider that you can expand your settlement areas into prime ag lands, but the thrust of the PPS is the preservation of prime ag lands. And actually, it has actually introduced a land analysis that we don't need to do because we've already done LEAR, but essentially it introduces LEAR into the PPS. And so other municipalities, and when they're assessing their agricultural lands, they'll be going through essentially a LEAR process now. That's going to be required. That is required by the province now. So they don't call it LEAR, but when you read the description of what they have to do, it's LEAR. That's exactly what it is. So that's a lot of moving parts, but I would agree with you absolutely. But I think the AIA is going to be the tool that we can try and make sure that we've addressed it. Obviously, as part of that 5-year review, we do a lot of stakeholder consultation. OFA is definitely one of them, right? That we're going to be looking at, the local chapters and getting that feedback as well from the farmers to ensure that that's included.
I just have one follow-up.
Yeah, go ahead.
If I can clarify something, and I'm looking at, actually, I'm not sure what I'm looking at here. The inclusion of the policies, the agricultural systems and the agricultural impact assessments. I do want to understand that a little bit better. It's related to use, not related to land designation. Is that, or are it related to both?
I'm going to pass this over to my colleague because Drew's done a lot more work about AIAs than I have.
Fair.
So there's two components that make up the agricultural system. It's both the agricultural land base and then the agri-food network. So when we're talking about land use designations, that's the land-based component of it. So it does look at the underlying soil capacity or quality, but it also considers a contiguous system. So similar to LEAR, there are lands that are designated prime ag that aren't necessarily of the soil quality needed for it, but they create a contiguous system and are thus prime ag. So it's the same approach under the agricultural system, a contiguous land base that does support agricultural uses. And then the agri-food network is more the use part. And the interesting thing is agri-food network, those uses don't necessarily need to be in a rural agricultural area. So in an urban setting like a city, if someone had like a farmer's market established, that's part of the agri-food network. And if there was any land use developments abutting that use, an AIA could be requested.
Okay. I find that really interesting because if we go back to the 2003 OP, at that time they had used like locally significant agricultural, like it was provincial language for that recognition of agriculturally significant lands that were not agriculturally, the soil itself was not prime. And I think that's part of the real challenge in a community like this, or not the community, but the land itself, where you have farming happening on not prime land, but that's what we have. So, that's what that challenge is. And certainly the Lear in some ways addressed it, in some ways made it more complicated, but I am interested to see how this will be used as a part of the policy creation moving forward. So I think that's the end of my comments. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Holmes.
Thank you. Yeah, this sounds like the agricultural impact assessment. It's going to be very interesting to see how we can apply it, because I think it's important. Just on another note, I was reading that actually the Lear in Leeds Grenville is being challenged by two different people, very similar to some of our business about, a small amount of agricultural land, a lot of, so I guess I'm wondering, and kind of looking to you, will the outcome of that kind of influence Lear and the rest of the province?
Through you, Chair, I think it'll depend on what the decision ends up being on that challenge. I'd say that the agricultural systems approach that Drew just described, like I said, that's something new in the PPS. And so for municipalities who have never done a Lear, I think it'll be a bit of a time will tell how those studies are completed, how those projects are done, and then who challenges them and what the decision is. So sometimes planning policies really result from what we call case law, in terms of OLT decisions. And I think we'll just have to wait and see on that one.
Thank you. And I just have one other question. In the last few days, this whole business of this fast-moving train going through our municipality, how is it going to impact our OPA 28? Or we don't know yet, but it is going to impact it if it comes through.
Yeah, through you, Chair. I think, based on the discussion we had at the last council meeting, I think that's a bit to be determined. If we all had crystal balls, it would be wonderful. We could be able to see what the impact would be, but right now we don't know.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of calls. First of all, I'm getting calls from people who feel that their land's going to be ruined because it's going to be torn in half and, they can't get to the other side. But also I'm getting calls from people, particularly along the hydro line, who have houses, who their houses are right in the way. And they're concerned, like, I think it's a 4-year hold on that land or something like that. And, a couple of them said to me, well, we plan on selling. They've just ruined the value of my house and I can't sell it and I'm not able to live here anymore. And they're elderly. So I don't know how we deal with that or if we do, but it is certainly a huge impact on our community. Thank you.
Yes, through you, Chair. I think that's a discussion for the folks at the federal government level as opposed to the municipal level, because it's levers that they're enacting that we don't have control over.
Yeah, I do agree it's a federal, but, do we need to be kicking it up to the federal level to make them aware that they're, ruining individual lives here?
Okay, Councillor Suter, do you have questions?
Just very briefly.
Yeah.
Soon as I quit talking the last time, Councillor Torrance brought up my second question. And in connection with that was cluster lots. I had gone through the limited service residential report again in preparation for this. And yes, it appears that, like, I don't know why, but our cluster lot development was very limited. And I think a magic number of 10, I think, might trigger subdivision. But several comparators or comparator municipalities have larger clusters, 5 to 7, 7 to 9, etc. And I would like you to consider enlarging the size of clusters in the future when you do the review. Because, again, new technologies might make it far more possible, far more feasible to create that type of residential growth in rural lands.
Okay. I just have a couple of things because most of what I'm thinking about, everybody else is also thinking about. The cluster lots, if they get too large, then I almost feel like we're doing a disservice to the villages that will eventually fail if we don't consider having them grow and stay relevant. Interesting. For me, I go back to our official plan where it says 30% growth will be rural, but yet it also says that we, for lack of better words, don't really want a whole lot of rural growth. So it really conflicts itself. So I'm glad we're doing this review. I am quite interested in conservatively allowing growth in the rural area and looking at how difficult that's going to be. We don't have an easy job in front of us. For anybody who's, I'm receiving emails and calls to, I hope no one was thinking that tonight we were going to make a decision whether to allow severances or not, because I don't think we're there yet. There's a bit more work to do, and I really appreciate the work staff has done to date. And sending you off with a long list of things to add to that 5-year review is going to make it even longer. And it's frustrating because we all want to get things done, but it's more important to get it right. So all of that said, I have a list, and I'm pretty sure Councillor Ferguson might want to add to it because you had a list of your own. Third severance, rural subdivisions, cluster lots, and can we remove the barrier of the private roads? The original 100-acre lots that back onto 2 concessions, can they have severances on both roads? Communal servicing, commitments, and I wrote down, there are commitments now to move forward where before there were concerns. So what does that do to our official plan? The use of ARUs, addressing the mix of ag and rural, considering that they conflict each other. It's easy to say I'm here and the farm is way over there, but what you do on your lot affects where the farmer can put up another building. So it is all intermixed. In terms of ARUs, I think I'd like to make sure we point out to people that if you build an ARU, and I'm sort of talking about retirement here. If you build an ARU and you're the people who have been living in the main house for a long time, you build an ARU and you can swap, right? And that's where I think the retirement sort of fits in there, gives people a way to maybe manage that. And the 40% being your ARU can only be 40% of the house. The last one I had was consider enlarging the size of the clusters. How did we do, Councillor Ferguson?
We hit a home run with it. We've certainly put in a lot of extra work on Melanie, but she had also identified a lot of these in her report. One question I do have, if it's in reference to ARUs, Melanie, did you see a point in time that the non-residential ARUs on farm property could conceivably be sold? Because right now they're nothing more than a rental unit. Is that a possibility they could be sold if all the conditions have been met?
Through you, Chair, I assume you mean be severed and sold, like be severed and then, yeah. That's going to solely rely, I think, on provincial policy and what the province does if they decide to change their directive in terms of ARUs. I personally think the idea of ARUs were introduced and mandated more for the larger cities than it was for like municipalities that are made up of how we are split between rural and urban and even just small town. So it has, again, as I've noted in the report, that, you know, that has been expanded in the new PPS to prime ag lands. So it really is going to depend on provincial direction and if the province changes their direction on it. I think the challenge for the ARUs in the rural or the ag is right now our policies require that they share one of two services. So if the policies were to change at the provincial level, allowing you to sever those ARUs, there would be some cost on the person who's severing it, because they would either have to build their own septic system or drill their own well, because you can't share those once you're on a separate lot. So that's one sort of hurdle that would have to be addressed, but it would be at a provincial level, I think, whether or not they could be severed.
Okay, so I have 3, so I'm going to go to,
Just-
do you want to follow up? Yep,
Oh.
and then Councillor Holmes and then Councillor Torrance. Yep, go
Just
ahead.
One consideration. A few years ago, we used to do tours of looking at roads. Is there any value, do you think, in having staff and council do it? I think it's lends itself more than a tabletop exercise. I think, I don't know how many staff members have toured rural. But I think it would be very, very valuable in what we've discussed tonight, to have appreciation as to what's out there, what it looks like, parts of rural, and give us a good understanding, or give a good understanding, provide a good understanding.
Yeah, through you, Chair, I can say that my staff definitely have had tours of rural. That's one thing that we do with them when they start at the municipality. We do it with the summer students as well. So we do definitely give them the tour to make sure that they understand sort of the context of everything. I definitely think that could be something that we could, it would be valuable probably to have that type of tour done, likely when we're doing the 5-year review, so that we can really appreciate, like, what are we contemplating, and you know, there's lots of examples of you know, good, bad, and ugly out there of what, you know, lessons learned and things like that. And so I think it's a valuable, we could add it to the list as a function of the 5-year review. I'd be happy to.
Councillor Holmes?
Melanie, just for clarification, so this OPA 28, and I have one person in particular who is most anxious to get it approved because of some of the work they want to do. So the question is, when would you anticipate, and I'm not asking you for a date sort of thing, that the OPA 28 would be, you know, approved in Lanark and back to us? And what is, does the 5-year review, it would be done separate from it. So although it almost sounds like they're combined, and they are a bit, but they are going to be separate.
Yes, through you, Chair. The OPA 28, if it's approved tonight, it would have to go to council for the bylaw to be passed, and then the package gets sent to the county. There's a process there. So I would say in another couple of months, we could feasibly have it approved, depending on who wants to, depending on the person you're talking about. There may be a subsequent, you know, maybe zoning exercise they might be waiting for, or maybe perhaps they would do their own zoning amendment now that we've got official plan policies in place that would permit something that they're contemplating.
Yeah. So just to follow up then, when the 5-year review is completed, it may indeed impact on OPA 28. So there would have to be an amendment yet.
Yes, through you, Chair. The 5-year review is contemplating the entire official plan. So it's a review of the entire official plan from page 1 to page 200 and whatever. Yes, so we'll be looking at the whole thing. In addition to that, as the mayor alluded to, the province has just tabled part part of their legislation of a mandated table of contents for official plans. So that'll be something that we have to implement as part of the 5-year review. So
And there are changes to the policy statements too, right?
yes, yeah,
so
potentially.
Never changes. Thanks.
Okay, so Councillor Torrance, sorry.
Oh, I just wanted to say, when I said about the cluster lot development, about looking at the roads, I meant look at the barriers to cluster lot development, such as roads, such as shared services, that kind of thing. Not really necessarily the roads specific. I don't want to open up private roads across municipality as part of this 5-year review. It's just only for cluster lot development.
Thanks. Staff have have made a list and included a couple more things, so they're going to post it. But I just want to bring everybody back around to the motions that we're considering. And I'll read them out now if everybody's okay with that. The recommended motions are that Committee of the Whole recommend that Council approve the official plan Amendment 28 to amend the policies of the community official plan similar in effect to Attachment B, and that Committee of the Whole recommend that Council direct staff to include a comprehensive review of the village boundaries, Pakenham, Clayton, Blakeney, and Appleton as part of the upcoming 5-year official plan review. And as well, could you put up the list that we talked about, just so that we are all on the same page? And I just want to kind of gauge how we're feeling about the motions, if someone's ready to put a motion on the floor. Oh, okay, so they grabbed the tour. And the agri-food systems. Include how the identified priorities are weighed. Okay, yep. The 9 priorities, yeah. Could you just for our remembering later, the 9 identified priorities? Proximity of special rural uses. Okay. That's quite a list. And again, we really appreciate staff. I also have to say I really appreciate my council colleagues, because this was a big report. And it's really clear to me that we all took a lot of time to read, understand, ask questions, and be prepared to have a meaningful conversation tonight. Where are we with the motion? Are we interested in making a motion for OPA 28 itself, and then obviously continue the work with the 5-year review? Councillor Holmes?
I feel we are, because I think if we hold it up now and to include a lot of this stuff in the OPA 28, instead of waiting for the 5-year review, we're going to hold this up and it's not
Yeah.
going to be advantageous. So I think I'm happy to pass it tonight, knowing that our issues are going to be looked at. Thank you.
So you'll make the motion? Yep. Do we have a second or a question? Before we go to the question, is there a second?
Process question.
Okay,
It's a
go ahead.
process question. Maybe we should separate this motion, because it would be really tidy for one, and the second is really much just staff direction. You know, if we were to separate them, I think that it would just be for the record. It would be better.
Separate the two.
The two.
So the second part
Yeah.
about the comprehensive
Yeah.
review.
Yeah.
So you'd like to split the motion?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you, yeah. Okay, let's split the motion. So are you okay to move section 1, which is approval of OPA 28? Is there a seconder? Councillor Torrance? Any other questions? Councillor Ferguson?
Yes, back to my original question, the priority of the priorities. Is that a place that we should put a motion forward or no?
You have a motion.
Is that address it? Okay, yeah, okay.
Motion, lots of staff direction.
Lots of staff direction, yep. Yep.
So that
okay.
second motion is turned into that
Yes.
entire page.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay,
Thank you.
no problem. All in favor of motion 1? Thank you, that passes. And so now we're on to motion 2. I'm not going to read it. We've seen it up there and I've said it a few times. No. All right, is there someone that would like to make that motion? Councillor Ferguson and seconded by Mayor Lowry. Any questions about that? Okay, all in favor? And that carries. Thank you very much. Thank you, staff, again. Appreciate you. And we're at adjournment. And so I'm just going to say we're adjourned at 8:09. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.